there. I am Dr. Kozicki, and this is A to Zig, the slippery slope, and welcome you to another program. Today's program is about socialism, a topic that is getting much more attention, and not surprising to me, but I think it is to some people. So, does that word scare you? Because socialism scares people. But there's a long history of reform in this country that is really socialist, and some unlikely figures have embraced that reform. And I really want to share with you about that so that you're going to be able to maybe get a long view of this and how it's been a part of the United States and this country for some time. So what is socialism? It's an economic system. Simple as that. It promotes a means of production, such as money and other forms of capital, to be owned to some degree by the public. Under a socialist system, essentially everyone works and wealth is distributed to everyone. Socialist nations are generally democratic and multi-party political systems. And so here's a list of the socialist parties right now that are active throughout the world. And you'll see some nations on that list that you're probably familiar with. I've visited many of these places. Brazil, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Iceland, Italy, Netherlands, Portugal, and Sweden, and Turkey, and the United Kingdom. Been to all of those places, and they're very nice countries. They have good economic systems. People are lively and in many ways engaged in the economy. And remember, socialists are economists, just like you and I. So how is that different from communism, which seems to always be kind of connected in language about it? Well, this is a political theory that was derived from Karl Marx, a German. And he advocated class war leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned, and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. And right now in this world that we live in, there are essentially 5 communist countries, although some people would put Russia, the Russian Federation in this. So we have Laos, Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, and of course, Communist China. All these countries are in the following of Karl Marx's thinking, although they do have economies that really move away from the Marxist ideas by a long shot. And I have visited all of those countries except North Korea. And so having been there, I've gotten a chance to look at how people live in their economy. And you know, my general feeling is it is repressive. A lot of the personal freedoms that we have in a democracy are not there, and people are afraid to speak. For instance, a program like this, which I'm doing right now, would probably be scrutinized quite a bit by officials, and they would be very interested in what my thoughts were about other subjects. So that's one of the drawbacks of this whole Marxian thinking is it's very authoritative. So let's talk about capitalism. This is an essential feature in the United States, and the motive in capitalism is to make a profit. Under capitalism, it's the government's job to enforce laws and regulations that make sure there is a level playing field for privately run companies. Now, again, you're probably thinking, wait a minute, capitalism, America, isn't America about freedom and liberty and all that? Yeah, for the business sector, essentially. I mean, the programs we have in place are to support business. And what is capitalism, basically? It uses incentives to structure the way people live. Prices are determined by the market. And the market forces determine what something will cost, my suit, your food, anything else. A profit and loss system of accounting is in place, and private property rights are respected. People are able to own and hold private property, and that's one way in which they actually gather wealth. So the capitalist system, economic system, is what we have here in the United States. So, is there a socialist threat? And this is really something that's coming up more and more because people are talking about this. Socialists remain a dirty and often misunderstood term in the realm of U.S. politics. And part of this goes back to the Cold War, in which there was a great deal of animosity and paranoid thinking, or paranoia really, towards the Soviet Union. And this was pervasive largely through the period of time when the Cold War existed. And the two major figures, of course, during that time would have been Nikita Khrushchev, the Russian premier, and, of course, Fidel Castro, the dictator of Cuba. And so those things still kind of hold over, but they weren't socialists. Remember, they were communists. And so sometimes people mistake socialism and communism, two different things. So is socialism a threat in America? Some people would say it is. Some people would say that it promotes the American dream. Nearly 21% of Americans consider socialism to be a threat to the U.S., even though they tend to disagree on what socialism actually is. Just 5% of people that were surveyed consider themselves to be socialists. So it's an exclusive group. It's not a large group. But nearly 28% support some policies that could be considered socialists. So what we have in this country is, if you look at a bell-shaped curve, on the tail ends you've got people who are against it, and on the other end you've got people that are for it. And a lot of people in the middle who aren't really sure about it and are still learning about it. So when we look at the American economy, it's a mixed economy. We have both capitalism and socialism in our economy. So the Democrats have had a long history of promoting public good using socialism as a model. That's why they oftentimes get thrown into this category of being socialists. Although keep in mind that Democrats, like the rest of the population, are not necessarily all socialists. And we could guess that maybe 28% of Democrats are socialists. Where the Democrats really targeted the use of socialists was during the New Deal. The New Deal was a Franklin Roosevelt attempt to deal with a major depression, an economic failure in this country that he needed to deal with. So what it did, what Franklin Roosevelt did, is he got the government to take responsibility for the welfare of the U.S. economy and American people. In other words, it wasn't anymore a freewheeling capitalist society in which anything goes, because that's what led to the Great Depression. And he realized that there needed to be some guardrails and some controls in order for the economy to be successful. And remember, we're talking about economics here. That's basically what this is all about, economics. So the greatest achievement of the New Deal was to restore faith in the American democracy. Because at that time, many people believed the only choice left, because capitalism had failed, democracy was failing, was between communism, and the communists were very much busy trying to convince people that they needed to, start a war with the government and throw everybody out of power, and fascism, which was another attempt to bring in some authoritarian leadership to govern people and to take away their free will and basically manage their lives. Both of these authoritative kind of approaches were rejected by FDR, who thought there must be something better. And he did actually create something better, the New Deal. We still have many of the New Deal programs with us today. So the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which protects our money in the bank. Fannie Mae, which makes it possible for all of us to be able to get into the loan market and get mortgages for our homes. Without Fannie Mae, most of America would be renting from a landlord. The Securities and Exchange Commission, which basically stepped in and said, okay, you people in the stock market, we're not going to have another one of these blowouts like we had last time. We're going to regulate the way you essentially run this stock exchange, which is, for the most part, a casino. We're going to make sure that this casino has some rules. The Federal Housing Administration, which went forward to actually create public housing and also make it possible for more people to live in places even if they couldn't afford a mortgage. The Farm Credit Administration. American farmers today depend on the farm credit system and all the things that go with it. Without it, they would have been like the farmers in the 1930s, just basically blown away, not owning anything, traveling around like gypsies, and going from place to place, hoping they have enough food to survive. If you look at the modern farm system, it is built on the back of the Farm Credit Administration. The Federal Communications Commission, which regulates things like this program that I'm on right now, and the internet and all the other kinds of things that are taking place, has a very dramatic role in how information is exchanged. The Soil Conservation Service, again, tied into farming, but also tied into saving the environment, because soil conservation translates oftentimes into saving the water infrastructure, because you've got some regulation on the way soil is being used, as well as the animals and those kinds of things that are there. And of course, probably the one that we are most aware of, Social Security Act, the Social Security Administration. Before Social Security, when people got old, if their kids couldn't take care of them, they were poor, they didn't have anything. They went from pillar to post, and what little savings they had probably didn't outlast their lifetime. And of course, the last thing, which I think is very important, the Fair Labor Standards Act, which actually helped create unions and laws about how occupational safety is going to take place. And I want to stop there for a second and stop my friend Tom Knob, who is a union member and is working today on the set, and also gave me the idea for doing these programs some time ago, and I want to just give him credit for being involved. He's a member of the labor force out there, a union member and so forth. The Fair Labor Standard Act really brought up the income level for people and made the middle class possible. So in 1938, when this law was passed, it made it possible for unions to form. And when they had that first strike in Flint, and they created the first attempt to have a living wage, the middle class was born. So we can't take that for granted. So when we look around and look at all the things that came from the New Deal, these were socialist programs. They were not the typical kind of programs that you'd expect. They came through as a time of strife. Now, what's the democratic socialism that we're dealing with now? Most people would say, geez, that sounds like Bernie Sanders. Sure, Bernie Sanders has been promoting this his entire life. It's of the people, by the people, for the people, essentially. Democratic socialists believe in democracy and democratic principles. They are by no means proponents of an authoritarian government system, however. So they believe that this is something that should come up from the bottom. So when we think about democratic socialism, we've had a history of this. It's not new. It's not Marxist. The Social Democrats, which are more common in Europe, are different than the Social Democrats that we've had here. And who are some of these Social Democrats? Well, I already mentioned one, FDR, but Teddy Roosevelt, who was a Republican, was a Social Democrat. Dwight Eisenhower, who was a Republican, was a socialist in some ways. Lyndon Johnson, of course, promoted democratic socialism, and Bernie Sanders is the most recent iteration of a political leader. So you've got 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats who promoted democratic socialism. So who are the modern socialists? Most of the time, there are these young people now who are looking at a change. What they want is a system of government that provides them, the citizens, with health insurance, retirement support, and access to free higher education. And I'm going to talk about education here and how important it is in a system of meritocracy in just a second, and why it's so important that we have education. So to put this in perspective, we are all socialists now to some degree. Maybe not, die-hard socialists, but we are all socialists because we've all drank from the socialist well. So social democrats see the role of private capital in their ideal system, and democratic socialists don't necessarily see it that way. So the American version of democratic socialism includes single-payer health care, free public college, and higher taxes on the wealthy to fund safety net programs, which is a standard in social democracies. So when we think about why this is happening, the first thing that comes to mind is the K-shaped economy. It does exist. This is something that Peter Atwater really brought into focus at a lecture at William and Mary University in Virginia. And what he said was, it's stacked inequity on one side and stacked privilege on the other. And it's a wildly uneven recovery in the US economy right now that is making people more aware of this K-shaped economy. COVID-19 in particular is wreaking havoc on equality in this country, and the K-shape is becoming even more profound. So there is a wage gap, and we've known that for a long time. The United States is somewhere in the middle in terms of gender wage gap, for instance. The dynamics of private capital accumulation inevitably lead to a concentration of wealth in fewer hands, or balancing forces have to come in and change that. So competition in technology has reduced some of that inequality, but it's also created some. So when we look at the wage gap now, we realize that many people are aware of it and want to do something about it. But here's where the real inequality shows up. In a society that is merit-based, where meritocracy is the proponent, not brawn labor, but essentially how smart you are, education becomes the most singular defining factor in whether or not you're going to have an income or not. And when you look at this K-shaped graph here, you can see that those people who have a high school education are in the downward graph. They're making less and less money every year. And it's going to continue that way. Those people who have an education are going to continue to make more money in the various areas where capital is being exposed to them and they have a chance to grab it. So the economic system is in a free fall right now, and inequality remains one of the most controversial attributes in it. The only way we're going to get out of this K-shaped economy is if we make education better for everybody. And by that I mean everybody has a chance to develop the skills to fit into this new economy, this gig economy that we're in. So this K-shaped economy has really given a small number of people enormous wealth at the expense of the majority of people, and it's not sustainable. We can't keep giving this enormous wealth to a few people and expect that the rest of the people are going to be able to survive. Right now, 80% of the publicly held stocks in the United States are owned by the wealthiest 10% of the population. Think about that. 80% of the publicly held stocks, the wealth out there on Wall Street, is held by 10% of the people. That's an inequality that is going to bust up many things in this country. So the remaining 10% of public stock ownership is not enough to lift millions of people out of becoming the working poor. So what are the benefits of socialism then? Well, Republicans and Democrats have both benefited from socialism already, because the stimulus of relief money, for instance, that we've seen time and again has helped both of those parties. Capitalism creates boom and bust economic cycles. And when that happens, that's when socialism or these economic stimulus packages or relief packages are important. That's socialism. Many of the people who complain about the nanny state are quick to ask for economic assistance when their business is about to fail. They don't see it as socialism then. They see it as a loan or a necessary gift to them in order for them to stay in business. American businesses utilize the government agencies and courts regularly to keep competition from eating them up. Economic socialism exists in this country. And so more recently, we've seen this in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. After the last big bust, Barack Obama basically floated billions of dollars in our last iteration, the Great Recession of our time. More importantly, it instilled confidence and a needed economic boost to get people back into the financial services industry. The stimulus was successful. The economy grew 1.7% in the third quarter and 3.8% in the fourth quarter after it was administered. Again, this is economic socialism. Well, we've seen it again. Now more recently with the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act, where $2 trillion was packaged and sent out to America. Stimulus checks were given to people. And then we saw an additional package with the COVID-19 relief package, which was just passed into law December 30th by the Democrats and some bipartisan support. And it included $600 relief check for many Americans, as well as lots of money for small businesses and hospitals. So these are socialist programs. They're nothing else but that. And there's proof that capitalism alone will not sustain the population, health, and national prosperity that we're looking for. So we do have American socialism. We need economic socialism to make money available to entrepreneurs and to add to the production and goods and services. Employee owners tend to raise both ownership and stakes of economic resources of America, however, when they involve workers in that economic deal. So America needs capital to promote commerce, but we need to give people the opportunity to earn a living wage also. So we have to have some socialism to make sure that there is shared wealth, and it just doesn't end up on Wall Street with 10% of the people. So democratic socialists are genuinely interested in developing a method for people on Main Street to share in the profit of Wall Street. And it's probably true what John Maynard Keynes had said about the fact that the free market economy requires aggregate demand as well as an opportunity to drive the economy with other kinds of forces. And this is where economic socialism plays a part. So, do you support socialism? That's a question that I'm asking you right now. And probably your first response to this is, no, I don't, because it's tied in somehow to the communist or something like that. It's not a communist thing. It's never been a communist thing. Marx is not a part of American socialism, unless you think people like Teddy Roosevelt and Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Dwight Eisenhower and Lyndon Johnson were communists, and they weren't. And so we're looking now at another opportunity for economic socialism to take place. We have a new president coming into play, Joe Biden. Joe Biden is already talking about economic socialism to help millions of people get through this COVID-19 epidemic and to recover from this crashed economy, this K-shaped economy, and to replace it with something else. So there's a new deal being created right now. Now, some people want to focus on the Green New Deal, which is a separate matter altogether. It has to do with the climate and the environment. That's a part of it. But the real story here is that democratic socialists or social democrats both are working with the current capitalists in this country to try to create a different kind of economy, one in which everybody succeeds. And remember, this is all about economics. Sometimes people lose that in this frame of thinking. This is about money. This is about living wage. This is about being able to feed your family, being able to educate your children, being able to take care of sick people. All of that is part of this package. And so what I want everybody to think about is that, you know, socialism is not a bad thing, but it depends on whether we have a democracy. If we have a democracy, socialism is a good thing. If we don't have a democracy, then we take our chances. So more important than anything, we all need to be a part of democracy. Let me have a quick story here. I have a hat here that I picked up in Moscow, Russia. I traded a Chicago White Sox hat for that. I got a hockey jersey and this hat from it. And I have a hat here from Cuba, which I got from a vendor who was selling things. Both of those are communist countries. We're not Cuba. We're not Russia. We're the United States of America. And as long as we take care of each other, we're going to be good. We're going to be fine. And that's the important thing to think about. So let's support our democracy. Let's not be afraid of socialism. It's worked for us in the past. As long as we're all engaged with it, it'll work for us again. And it's not a dirty word. It's just a means to economic equality. Thank you very much for listening, for being a part of A to Zig, the slippery slope. And I will remind everybody, we're still in a COVID epidemic, and it's important not to think that it's gone away. Wear your mask, keep social distance. When the vaccine comes, get your vaccine. I got my vaccine. I'm going to get my booster in a couple weeks. You do the same thing. Thank you, everybody. Peace, love. America is the best place in the world. Thank you.